Carly was obsessed with worms, all because her brother had flung 3 fat pink worms on her while she skipped along the path at the edge of the cornfield. She had screamed bloody murder and run to their babysitter, Marla, in tears. "Worms are cool," Marla explained. Carly wasn't convinced just yet, but Marla was an expert on what was cool. Even her brother said so. Her tears still flowing, she listened. "You know what happens when you cut a worm in half? You get 2 worms." Carly stared at her. 2 dead worms? No, 2 live worms. Marla wriggled her fingers at Carly like they were worms. If you took a worm, cut it in half, you have 2. Now imagine you took the new worms and cut them in half again. You would have 4. Keep going, and you could have infinite worms. Okay, Marla was right. That's pretty cool. What about infinity plus 1 worms? Carly said, no longer crying. Marla laughed. You're going to be a mad scientist one day, Carly. Carly was instantly taken with the concept of infinite worms. She found it was somehow freeing and empowering that something that used to make her skin crawl now fascinated and delighted her. That night, she dreamt that her closet was so full of worms, the door bent like a potato chip from the pressure. The next night, she dreamed that she was in a bathtub full of worms, perfectly content to watch them squirm around her toes and torso, multiplying and multiplying until they were all she could see. On the 3rd night, she had the bathtub dream. She knew she needed to do something. It started with beetles and snakes. She wanted to find things that repulsed her, hold them, and keep them till she wasn't squirmy wormy around them, and then cut them in half. She used her father's fancy kitchen knives for the beetles, but found a serrated bread knife to be the most satisfying way to cut a snake. They all died, obviously. She wasn't surprised. Marla said worms are cool, that worms can regenerate, Marla's words, into infinity. But she was curious now, because who had discovered this fun fact about worms? Surely there were other gross things with superpowers out there. Carly just had to keep cutting until she found another special creature. She figured scientists had mice to experiment with. No discoveries to be had there. Has anyone tried to make infinity cats? Why do you want to find Snowball? Dylan asked, barely listening to her, like any good big brother. Dress up? She lied. That cat doesn't want to play with you, he said, returning to his basketball hoop. I want to play with her. She knew Dylan was good at catching things. He caught frogs, squirrels, even a blind mole once. He kept his treasures in the back of the old barn, behind the tractor. He'd feed them rat poison and bleach, keeping notes about it all in a journal Carly was not allowed to touch. Dylan was a bit of a mad scientist himself. Okay, he said, as if he were agreeing to a chore. But Carly was ecstatic that her big brother was going to play with her. It was almost 4 o'clock. Marla hadn't seen the kids in almost 3 hours. She should probably get them tidied up and ready for dinner. Their father wouldn't be back from his 2-week trip till tomorrow morning, and Marla thought fondly about returning home. She liked the kids. Dylan was a little creepy, but Carly was adorable. But she missed her own bed and her cat, and not being responsible for anyone but herself. She checked the path along the cornfield first. Carly's jump rope and Dylan's basketball sat abandoned next to the old barn. Marla had been told not to let the kids play in there, and she had assumed the rule applied to her as well. She sighed, reminding herself that she was still in charge, at least for one more night, and opened the barn door. Marla was struck first by the smell of death. Next, the low cries of Snowball, now nothing like the picture on the lost cat posters from around the neighborhood. The cat was writhing back and forth on her back, a legless torso with gnarled stumps where the legs had been, were clotted with elastic bands and rags. Halved snakes lay around her in various degrees of rotting, their vertebrae jolting through their scales. Marla didn't hear Carly giggle as she shut the door beside her, didn't even look away from the mangled cat until she heard the tractor start up.
Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you had a good scare or two. And if you did, give this video a thumbs up so we can spread the nightmares around. Stay haunted, my friends. I'll see you next time.